After months of campaigning and days of tension, the winner of the Zimbabwe presidential election was finally declared.
Mnangagwa Emerson Dambudzo of ZANU-PF party is declared duly elected President of the Republic of Zimbabwe with effect from 26 August 2023.
In what seemed to be a landslide victory for the incumbent president, Emmerson Mnangagwa of the ruling party ZANU-PF, he took 52.6% of the vote compared with 44% for the leader of the main opposition party, Nelson Chamisa. Mnangagwa, while addressing the people, appreciated them for voting him as their president once again.
The elections have come and gone. I'm humbled by the trust and confidence that you, my fellow countrymen and women, have reposed on me to once again serve as president of our great country, Zimbabwe. There are no winners or losers, but one united people of Zimbabwe. Thus far, we have shamed our detractors who wish to see us divided and in harmony. We shall forever remain a united, peace-loving and resilient people.
Meanwhile, opposition party supporters are not happy with the result as they are convinced that the just concluded elections witnessed a series of electoral malpractices, especially from the ruling party, ZANU-PF leaders and supporters.
The election observer missions raised and confirmed a series of electoral malpractices which resonate with our own assessments. Number one, the absence of electoral reforms, a flawed and controversial delimitation exercise. Dr. Mumba's unwavering commitment to ensuring transparency in the elections was met with unfortunate threats, including death threats and intimidations, especially from ZANU-PF leaders and supporters.
Analyst describes Zimbabwe's 2023 general election as the worst in the country's history.
These elections, they were, the worst elections ever to be held in Zimbabwe's history, political history of electoral politics. For the first time, these observer missions objectively pointed out to the glaring and brass-and-written tactics. Only 11% of participants, as candidates were women, implying that it was highly, it excluded a critical section of our population.
However, Mnangagwa's victory only meant that the ZANU-PF retained the governmental leadership it had held for 43 years of Zimbabwe's history, since the nation was renamed following independence from white minority rule in 1980.
Here, we're expecting change, development within the country, and economic stability.
Zimbabweans, however, hope the president's second and last term will bring positive dividends to the South African nation.
Thank you very much for that report. We're now joined this morning by Makomborero Haruzive. He's a Zimbabwean political analyst based in London. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning. Thank you for making me join.
All right. ZANU-PF has been re-elected into office. This will mean 43 years of ZANU-PF being in office ever since Zimbabwe gained independence from British rule in 1980. What does this mean for the people of Zimbabwe?
Number one, ZANU-PF was not re-elected. It was not elected. It was just declared by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission because the results that were announced have nothing to do with the voting that happened in the past few days. But going further, we saw the reports by international observer missions. We saw reports by the African Union, by SADC. We saw reports by COMESA. We saw reports by the Carter Center, the European Union election observer missions. And yesterday, the United Nations Secretary General also released a statement, and all these are proof that Zimbabweans' case for freedom and cause for a new great Zimbabwe for everyone. We have high moral authority among Zimbabweans in the region, in the continent, and in the world. So Zimbabweans' reaction to this is, I'm sure no Zimbabwean is ready for another 5 years of corruption or watch the gold mafia. No Zimbabwean is ready for another 5 years of gross human rights abuses. We saw what happened 2019, January demonstrations where many women were raped, many were abducted and tortured. We saw the harassment of journalists, Popo Chingono and others, Blessed Mhlanga. You know, they were persecuted, record persecution. Zimbabweans can't wait to have Job Scala and other political prisoners like Jacob Ngarufume and the Mtwakazi Republic 9 in jail for 5 years. Zimbabweans, in this election, I think what the Zimbabweans expression can be best judged by how they behaved in this election. The Zimbabweans' resilience and patience in the face of disinformation attacks, the very late of delivery ballot papers and opening of polling stations, tampering with the internet, the fast intimidation, arrests, and delivering of wrong ballots and rigging shenanigans. That is proof of unparalleled patriotism. It shows that Zimbabweans in this election were not only voting against something, they were not running away from something, but they were voting for something. They are going for somewhere. They want a new great Zimbabwe for everyone. So this determination will not be disturbed. It will not be hindered by the results that have been announced. Imagine people stood for 12 hours waiting for ballot papers which were supposed to have, arrived on the morning of the election day, but they wait 12 hours later. Even one Zimbabwean in Warren Park, he died while waiting in the queue. This determination shows that something's going to happen. And unlike previously, where we had the opposition really taking radical steps or responding through protests, I don't think at this point Zimbabweans have faced everything. Zimbabweans have been to court before. Zimbabweans have been, tried to resist electoral rigging before. But this time around, I'm sure every Zimbabwean understands that it's no longer about the opposition. It's no longer about going to the courts post they are captured, but it's about the citizens themselves. It's about their votes, each protecting their own vote, each demanding their own future. So the reaction, I think we are going to see more reactions from citizens themselves. We are going to see more reaction from voters themselves, each protecting their own vote, not in going into confrontation with government or anything, but each peacefully demanding a new great Zimbabwe for everyone.
All right. The CCC has rejected the results, saying that the result does not reflect what actually took place during the elections. But let me ask you this. Don't you think that the hours that were spent on queue to actually vote was compensated for, seeing that the elections expanded to 2 days? Don't you think that was a good compensation? And secondly, since the CCC is not accepting the results, what's the way forward?
The hours that were added, they were not compensated. They could not compensate the extreme levels of voter suppression we witnessed. Because, look, people had waited to vote for 12 hours and no ballot papers have arrived on the election day. It is unprecedented. So most of them, and I can say close to 2 million, were affected by these tactics countrywide. And this also involves the forced voting by FARS, who had tables and agents at each and every polling station across Zimbabwe, including in the capital city, and also in remote areas where there were no observers. So adding more time to voting means adding more time for intimidation. So it does not compensate anything or everything. And with regards to the CCC rejecting the results, it's not their choice, it's not their decisions, it's the decisions of the Zimbabweans who have shown massive support for the opposition, for the alternative, in pursuit of a new great Zimbabwe for everyone. So CCC is not their decision, rather, but it's the decision of the citizens of Zimbabwe. If they were to accept the results, I will tell you that the ordinary Zimbabweans wouldn't have accepted CCC's acceptance of these sham results. So and also we saw the CCC rejecting the results in the face of them scoring victories in an unfree and unfair and rigged process. But what this shows, despite them stopping ZANU-PF from gaining 2/3 majority in parliament, this shows that even if CCC had won in this election, this will not in any way sanitize the worst election ever in Zimbabwe's electoral political history of elections. So CCC did what they feel that the voters feel and the voters had expressed was not reflected in the outcome declared by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. The way forward, generally, this is no longer a time for politicians or political parties to provide the way forward, but this is the time for Zimbabweans themselves. I think the world saw how Zimbabweans traveled from across the world. They booked flights from London, from America, they booked buses from South Africa, from Zambia, from Botswana. It's recorded. For the first time ever, they said, no, let's go and vote. And seeing even Zimbabweans in the diaspora going to vote, it means that Zimbabweans are no longer voting against something, against ZANU-PF or against corruption, but they are now voting for something. They are going to a new great Zimbabwe. They now want a better Zimbabwe. They now want a Zimbabwe for everyone, a Zimbabwe that is for the many, not the few. And this will also guide the response by Zimbabweans. But those very same Zimbabweans who braved the night waiting for ballot papers, which arrived even after 12 hours at polling stations which are less than 7 kilometers away from the Zimbabwe electoral headquarters. This shows that this determination, the same energy that they have, they are not willing to let it go to waste. They will definitely take up necessary, peaceful, but critical steps to defend their vote. They will definitely do everything possible to ensure that the new great Zimbabwe, which is characterized by jobs, which is characterized by a functional economy, which is characterized by a government that listens to issues and addresses the concerns of citizens, to a government that doesn't tolerate gross human rights abuses, to a government that values development ahead of corruption, to a government that is not tolerant to abuse of power, to a government that ensures that there is no more state capture, judicial capture. We see people are suffering in jail, innocent people. We saw even during the elections.
Jumping at this point.
Local election observers were arrested. So
yes, I'm glad that you mentioned the election observers, and I want us to quickly talk about this in less than 1 minute because we've run out of time. Several international election observers have published and released statements after the elections were concluded. Some of them saying that the elections were peaceful but did not meet the guidelines for what would match up to a free and fair election. One of the bodies that have released this publication is also the SADC. I wanted to ask what your thoughts are as regards the strength of the international community in driving home what the general population of Zimbabwe will refer to as a democratic, democracy. So what is the strength of the international organizations, and are there communities that are expected to step in and speak up or maybe put in some measures?
Elections, international observer missions calling the elections peaceful. I understand very well that these election observer missions, they were assessing like on the voting day, but an election is a process. And if we are to judge by election being a process, not a one-day event or 2 days event, the elections were not peaceful. But with regards to what the election observer missions observed, of course, we accept both they are being very honest, despite them not being able to be in areas like Chirezi South, where FARS agents were even moving around with guns, forcing people to vote for ZANU-PF at gunpoint. So it was, I think it's part of objectivity that they write in their preliminary reports, they deliver what they observed. But also they raised critical issues to do with voter suppression. They raised critical issues to do with massive rigging. They raised critical issues of the elections failing to reach, the thresholds, regarded for credibility thresholds in SADC, in African Union, and the world, as shown by observer missions from the Carter Center, from the European Union, and also the statement by the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres. So these statements by the international elections observer missions, while they might not be able to force or to determine politically what happens to Zimbabwe, it emboldens the Zimbabwe, because this shows that the Zimbabweans' cause for a new great Zimbabwe, for everyone, is, it's an issue and demand that has high moral authority, not only among Zimbabweans, but in the region, in the continent, in the world, because this is the first time for such things to happen. To have SADC being objective about the problems in Zimbabwe, to have the African Union being objective and clear, to castigate elections rigging in Zimbabwe, and also all these others coming, including the highest level of the United Nations. So this emboldens Zimbabweans into knowing that their cause is appreciated and it's understood by the world, unlike in the past where the world really didn't understand the Zimbabwean cause.
Mr. Haruzive, Mr. Haruzive, I mean, we've gotten some of your points mentioned here in this conversation. I want to thank you so much for buying time to speak with us this very day. Thank you so much. We look forward to have you again. Hopefully, we'll also get updates on what CCC plans to do. We do hear that a press briefing might ensue anytime soon. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.